A lot of our discussions actually do end up focusing on passenger vehicles, but up next, we're going to have a panel talk on the future of electrification in the commercial vehicle market. And according to some forecasts, in fact, as early as 2030, so that's very soon, so just a couple of years, zero-emission vehicles powered by batteries or fuel cells are actually forecast to account for 1/3 of all trucks in Europe, North America, and Greater China. And by the year 2035, according to some forecasts, their share in these markets could rise to as high as 70%. Now, this does sound maybe very optimistic, for sure, but it's still important to remember that there are some very key differences when it comes to the electrification of commercial vehicles compared to what we're dealing with when we're looking at passenger cars. So to talk about what these differences are and what we can learn perhaps from the passenger vehicle market, I'm pleased to welcome my panelists, and you can see we have once again a large collection of experts. So I've got coming up on stage with me Marco Matutis, the CEO and founder of Ecovia. We've got Vincent Stauner, he is team lead charging system development for MAN Truck and Bus. I've got Frederic Ridou, he's the EV charging business development manager for Huawei Digital Power Germany. Anton Achatz, managing director for Mehr Austria. He's also director of the business development and product management for Germany. And Annie Hudson, who's head of public charging partnerships at Volvo Energy. So let's do it, guys. So panelists, join me up on stage. Come on up. Oh my goodness. It was the same thing yesterday when I had such a large panel. The person at the end seems so far away, so I'm just going to wave to my panelist at the end. So maybe this is kind of a strange question to start with at a conference for electric mobility, but I'm just going to ask it anyway. So why is the commercial vehicle industry focusing so much on BEV technology? Because we have other options, like, for example, hydrogen. That could also be an alternative fuel for reducing CO2 emissions. So why, in your industry, the focus on electrification?
I think so. The main reason is, of course, the total cost of ownership and the availability on the other side of a green hydrogen. So we clearly see that the TCO for BEV mobility, so BEV vehicles, are positive from 2025 on compared with diesel trucks. For hydrogen, the calculation is much more difficult, so it will be in the foreseeable future much more expensive. On the other side, also the energy efficiency from BEV vehicles are around 2/3, while as for hydrogen, the well-to-wheel efficiency is about 1/3. So you just need much more energy in the whole chain to use it in the vehicles. And these are the main reasons. And of course, also the refueling infrastructure. There will be some more challenges to be solved, while as for charging infrastructure, we have with MCS a very good system where you can recharge the battery within the 45 minutes driver's break, and even have future for future use cases covered, like coaches or other industries. And there is, I think, a very good and robust solution and a cheap solution. The battery cost will also decrease significantly with future technologies such as sodium ion. Yeah, that's from my perspective.
Yeah, I would say from our perspective, it's not a one or the other type scenario. We're not saying we're committing fully to one future. We all need to move towards a more sustainable transport future, and heavy-duty vehicles are an essential part of that. And so I look forward to next year's HubJect conference when there's a panel about passenger vehicles, and you say, I know we focus on commercial vehicles most of the time, but let's talk about passenger vehicles now. So for us, it's really a mixed solution, but the fact is the battery electric trucks are on the road, and they need infrastructure, and we need to charge them. And so it makes sense to really focus on how to put that infrastructure in place to support our customers and to support our vehicles.
So we will see perhaps a future that involves both. Does everybody agree?
I do agree.
Okay, interesting.
We will see it also as a complementary technology. So we are also taking research into hydrogen with combustion engines, but also with fuel cells. But we predict that the majority in the foreseeable future will be BEV vehicles, but some special use cases, remote locations where you do not have access to really high power charging infrastructure, that could be a complementary solution.
Right. So, before we go on, why don't we just take a minute to clarify what exactly are we talking about when we say commercial vehicles? Because it's not only trucks, right? So what else are we looking at when we speak of commercial vehicles?
I'm a fan of raising the topic of buses because I was working for a bus company before and everybody forgot about the buses, was talking all about trucks. But with the electrification of city buses, the buses were a forerunner in the industry, and we were running through all of the topics that the trucks will follow now. So I think there's a lot of experience for both departments that we can learn from. And let's not forget about the buses and the coaches in future, because if you plan now a charging hub for a truck, I think it's very important to think about what will happen in 2030, 2035, when you have a coach arriving there with 50 people getting out. And if you then before have designed the entire layout of the truck charging hub only for trucks, then you might have some issues. Yeah.
And also to add, we have commercial road vehicles, but we have other sort of commercial vehicles like agricultural vehicles. The mining industries, for example, that's a really big challenge. We have also ideas to use megawatt charging as a basis, a more ruggedized version. So these industries are also highly interested in the experience that we gather for road vehicles today.
So we see these commercial vehicles as vehicles that transport paying passengers or transport goods, and they can go also towards utility vehicles for mining and such heavy duties. And yes, so these are all vehicles that are part of a service delivery, and which are looking at having very reliable networks and equipment for delivering these services.
From a Volvo Group perspective, there's actually a whole host of vehicles we could be talking about. I think we do a panel on each of them: construction equipment, as we're mentioning, buses, boats. But I'd also like to mention trucks are also not a one-size-fits-all electrification conversation. There are many different size, forms, uses of trucks. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's such an interesting conversation, is we have a lot of different use cases that we can discuss and figure out what the infrastructure and what the needs of those vehicles are.
I think we also have to remember is how different these vehicles are used. So I know that the agricultural vehicles are super emitters right now. I mean, they're just the dirtiest kind of vehicles that are out there at the moment. And, the buses, they start and stop and start and stop and start and stop. So, that plays into how it needs to use energy. And the trucks often are carrying very, very heavy loads, or they're going very, very long distances. So I guess there's all of these factors. So why don't we break it down a little bit? So because buses came up first, why don't we talk about that? Because in China, for example, that country is a front runner when it comes to e-buses. Why is that? And what can we learn from the successful implementation of electric bus systems in China?
I think you need to have a look at the difference in technology that they're using as well. The buses, like if you have a look at cities like Shenzhen, where they have a 5-figure amount of electric buses running there for years. What they do is they have very scalable AC charging infrastructure at the depot, and they have a lot of spare vehicles. So if one bus is not charged, they always will have one or two to replace that. And this makes it a little bit more easier for the disposition of buses. When we made projects in Germany or other European countries with city buses where you have like very high demands for availability and you don't want to go over 2, 3, 4% of the fleet to have spare buses, then it's a little bit more complex. And I think the availability of the grid and construction permits in China might be a little bit easier than in some of the European countries, definitely.
So these are the challenges, but are there any lessons that we could learn that we could apply to other markets, let's say in Europe or North America?
Just do it.
Just do it, okay? Everybody paying attention?
Yeah.
Okay.
Although I might add what we're really seeing with commercial vehicles, with passenger vehicles, it can be an emotional decision to buy a car. You like the electric car, you think it looks great, but you can have a more limited range, try it out. For commercial vehicles, it really is a business case. And so you have to have all these different factors from the environment coming together. The technology has to be there, the policy has to be there, the players have to be there. And that's what we saw in China in the bus context. And that's kind of what we're seeing emerge in Europe now too, which is why it's this snowball that's starting to roll, because now the business case really is there for buses, for trucks. And so that then you have this massive industry that understands what a good business case is and is moving forward with it. So I'd say we've already learned a lot of those lessons in many ways.
And one of the impacts also to see in China is between the pre-COVID times and now times for any people going to China these days, it's amazing how the air quality has improved inside the cities. You can really feel it. So I think we should never forget why it has all started, why we're doing that, even though there's a business case, but it's also being done to improve the air quality. And it's very effective in China when you see the masses of electric buses, electric cars inside the cities. It's really working. And I think for that regards in China, they are quite advanced. And we know that from the development of electric mobility across the fleets, which are driving inside the cities.
Okay, so Annie says there's a business case, and Marco says just do it. So what needs to happen so we just do it? So what do you think could give us the push to really boost the number of electric buses that we see on European streets and North American streets?
So the legal frameworks should be available. So and also the funding of the infrastructure. Also, the customers needs, of course, a holistic support, how they plan infrastructures, how they plan their routes to be also optimized for electric mobility. Yeah, so that's why we have to go away in the industry from focusing just on the vehicles to also have for example, what we have at MAN is the MAN Transport Solutions, where the customers can get full support, which infrastructures they could use depending on their needs, which routes to choose, and yeah, just supporting with the whole picture, not just focusing on the vehicles from OEM perspective. Yeah.
And I think one difference between commercial vehicles and passenger cars is that at passenger cars, everybody was talking about the chicken and egg problem. What needs to come first, infrastructure or vehicles? And I think this is very clear at commercial vehicles. The infrastructure needs to be there. Otherwise, the vehicles will not get out. This is so there are needed big investments upfront into infrastructure wherever those vehicles will be moving. Otherwise, they will not be on the road. So this is the biggest, I think, enabler for telling logistic companies that they can go out and drive electric. The infrastructure needs to be there first.
I would like to add a +1 to that comment, if I can. The infrastructure is really the essential piece here to make it happen. But it is already happening. We already have the vehicles on the road in many ways.
All right, so let's maybe then turn our attention to electric trucks. So what are then the specific challenges facing this segment, and also maybe some opportunities that we can look forward to?
First of all, the opportunities are, of course, the energy efficiency and also the possibility to have clean, sustainable transport. Considering that long-haul trucks account for 2/3 of the CO2 emissions in the road vehicle segment, so that's a big lever. Although the amount of vehicles is significantly smaller than for the passenger vehicle fleets. Also that it is silent. It's also important within large cities that we have also not so much noise emissions. And also the total cost of ownership, what we already discussed, that is quite positive for BEV in the near future. But of course, the challenges are also the energy consumption needs to be optimized. But there, I think we have good solutions. Battery aging, we also have much experience from the passenger vehicle industry that we could reuse. But one biggest challenge is, of course, the availability of suitable charging infrastructure, especially for MCS, where we have the megawatt charging ranges, and power management on the sites, and also just the big speed of rollout of vehicles where we are ahead of, or what we expect in the next years. So that needs to be a big commitment from all parties, CPOs, OEMs, to just have suitable charging infrastructure in the next 1-2 years, starting up to 2030, that everybody can charge at a suitable point. Yeah.
Maybe to add on that one, I mean, when you speak about the speed and infrastructure, and when you know when you want, for example, to build on a German highway, even for EVs, it's quite complicated, let's say that way, because we have the political commitment, the legal framework, the authorities, the allowances, and I think when we speak about a charging hub for long-haul trucks, it's a total different story. It's not like, I would call it electric vehicles for passengers, like kindergarten, but now it's getting serious because it's just bigger, it has to work, and there is no second chance. Yep. And for that, when we come back, I think the legal framework and also the political commitment really has to be set to allow an investment in a bigger scale.
Definitely.
But that being said, the really nice thing about commercial vehicles is that they have very predictable routes and they use a lot of energy. And so unlike passenger cars where we have to guess at human behavior and figure out where exactly they're going to be, we know where these trucks are going. We understand, we have a lot of information on exactly who's doing what route, where, and they do them over and over again. And when they do charge, it's going to be 10 times that of passenger trucks. So it's a lot of energy and it's a lot of money kind of associated with that as well.
What about innovations in just how trucks are built if they're running on electric energy as opposed to combustion engines? Are there any developments or innovations in, I don't know, creating lighter trucks or trucks that are somehow more aerodynamic so that they don't need as much energy? Like, what are the latest developments in these areas?
So aerodynamics is a big topic. We can optimize by optimizing the cab, for example, in general, so the energy consumption, but also the energy management, so how it's operated, so that we could, for example, take with a smart route planning application, the topography or the height profile in general of the route into account, and also regarding the production, new ways how to build the chassis so that we have more room to play with where we pack the batteries, also to optimize the weight, and of course in general the production process, that it's also then optimized for electric vehicles, to have also to build the trucks faster, more efficient, and so these are most important points, I think.
Yeah, I'd say from our perspective, our bread and butter is optimizing every little piece of the vehicle. It's actually really interesting to go around to all the different research areas and see that. But another key element is making sure that the vehicles themselves are in the flow for mass production, so that it brings the overall TCO down, the total cost of ownership, because in many ways that's one of the essential pieces of electric trucks. It's not just, it's bringing down emissions is essential, but it also is a better ultimate cost benefit decision for a lot of our customers. And so designing a truck that is a fantastic truck, that is electric and that is affordable is really kind of the priority in getting that into the system.
You also need people to drive these electric trucks. So, I'm just curious, at least in the passenger electric vehicle segment, a lot of the early adopters tend to be people on the higher end of the income scale. They tend to have higher levels of education, perhaps. We can generalize. They're people who love technology, who are, willing to try something new, but, perhaps when we look at the people who are hired to operate commercial vehicles, they're coming from a different segment of society. How do you manage the education that's needed, and what has been your experience with how open and willing drivers are to operate? I mean, we can start maybe with the trucks, since that's what we've been talking about. So how is your experience with the drivers of electric trucks?
So we have the experience, of course, at the beginning we see a barrier, we see also question mark, how this new technology will behave, will it be robust enough, how charging works. But I think the most important thing is as early in the development as possible to take also the experience of so long years drivers into account, and listen to them, showing them that they can experience how electric mobility works, what also the advantages is, and have open ears and have a constant improvement, and also at the same time make sure that charging as a experience is as robust and as straightforward as possible, with billing systems, with charging communication robustness, with interoperability, so that these problems of the early years are as good solved as possible, and showing the advantages also for the driving experience, where you have a good torque at the beginning, so within the city it just makes fun, and convincing them of the advantages.
I think communication is key, because I've seen both. I've seen truck drivers or bus drivers that have just been handed over a key to an electric vehicle, and then I met them at the charging station where they tried to plug in at a 50 kilowatt charger, somewhere triple charger in the middle of the city, and they were just lost because it didn't work. They didn't know whom to call, they didn't know what to do. And if this impression gets first time into a company, everybody will say, don't touch the electric vehicle. And then the willingness to get into that vehicle again and drive like a 400 kilometer trip is gone. So this is why, as an OEM or anyone handing over vehicles to companies that are using it commercially, you need to go there, stay a week, spend time with those guys, make test drives, and make sure that they lose this first fear of how to touch this vehicle. And what you then see is that they actually like it, and they will fight for the electric vehicle to take it instead of the diesel one.
Yeah, I imagine range anxiety is something completely different, or a completely different dimension if you're a long-haul truck driver than somebody who's zipping around a city in a small, passenger vehicle. So how do you address this concern in the truck drivers?
So first of all, with supporting in route planning, for example, with also then not designing our trucks at the edge of the use cases, but also gives some room to play with with the battery capacities, etc. Also with simultaneous build-up of suitable charging infrastructure that they are also available, so the whole ecosystem that I can plan my route in advance, or the logistic company can plan it with reservation systems, so that I also know as a driver I have also a suitable slot available when I arrive there, linked to real-time traffic information, for example. And also not only the range anxiety is also of course key, but also the time that a customer might lose if a charger won't work. They have to for example, they have to also take care that they do not extend their driving durations. So it's really crucial that also the charging process itself is really reliable. And
yeah, I think one of the really interesting parts of this industry is there are so many layers of people that you're designing for, from the fleet managers themselves to the drivers, and you have to take them all into account when designing this system. And yeah, the fleet managers play an important role in actually making sure that the routes are designed so that that range anxiety is taken away, that you have your infrastructure planned, booked, prepared for. But then the drivers, they are experts at what they do too. Already within diesel, they have support from the vehicle to optimize the kind of fuel behavior, so that they're braking in certain ways, approaching in certain ways. So they're already set up nicely to do the same for electric vehicles, to know kind of to have that support in place to optimize their driving behavior, to maximize the fuel or the efficiency of the vehicle as they drive.
I've seen a nice example where one city in Germany, they made like a competition for the drivers. So they were they were analyzing all of the energy consumption each driver had, and each week they had like the top 5 drivers, and this publicly in the Mensa area where they meet for lunch. And you see those drivers and, okay, how do you recuperate? How do you use a pedal? Are you one pedal driving? Are you using a brake? And so they get into this competition to make driving more efficient, and then they like it. Yeah.
Yeah. But maybe when we come back to range anxiety, I see it rather, it's a parking lot anxiety. I mean, we see it already today. When you go on the highway and it's the wrong timing, they have to park anywhere. And now we have the component of charging. So there has to be a parking lot plus charging, plus power available because of the driving duration. And I think that's a challenge, and we are talking the EV sector for reservation since ever, and now it has to be done in all the layers. And I think that's key, that and comes back to the user journey. Mm-hmm. How can the driver in the truck make a reservation, find the right spot, and when you think on the design of a big hub, who comes in, who goes out first, that's the real deal.
And that should be planned in advance, I guess. Huh? And that's it's not a driver that's doing that. It will be the system, the route planners that should be doing that in an ideal world, I guess.
Ideal world, yes, but we know everyone knows what's happening when something goes wrong.
Right.
But one of the components of range anxiety amongst the EV driver is not the fact how long will the EV drive, but will the charger that I'm aiming for be there, working and available? This is a key component, and for this, the charging infrastructure is a key component of securizing the whole driver journey. It has to be there, working and available as scheduled.
Okay, so then, you know, we keep coming back to the importance of adequate charging infrastructure. So we've heard so many different ideas about the future of charging infrastructure, but coming from a commercial vehicle perspective, and maybe specifically about trucks that have very specific needs, if you could design the perfect type of charging infrastructure for trucks, and also a payment system and all of these things, for a truck driver, commercial vehicles, what do you believe is the best type of, you know, charging experience?
I would say from our perspective, there are, of course, some key features that have to be there for every station. It has to be the right height. You have to be able to drive through your vehicle, things like that. But the most important piece is exactly what you were saying, which is that it works and that it has high power levels that can be sustained over the full charge, and it works every time you arrive and you can get the charge you need. But that being said, I wouldn't say that it's a one-size-fits-all answer, because it really does depend on the use case, and there are multiple different use cases for multiple different kinds of trucks or routes. And so that's kind of why it's a fun game to be playing right now, because it's really a partnership with the people building the infrastructure and with the OEMs to figure out, okay, let's really design the system so that we understand what the uses are in the first place and what the optimal infrastructure situation is for that.
So the different use cases, I definitely agree. So a perfect infrastructure will be that we have, for example, MCS for opportunity charging, but we should also not forget the overnight charging use cases, or on public holidays where you do not really need much power. So the CCS power range is perfectly sufficient. So you can have then different charge site layouts for the different, so opportunity and overnight charging use cases. Also, yeah, smart connected to reservation systems, to power management, to different types of backend systems. That is very important.
And it has to be optimized for investment as well. So if you have MCS charges charging full power during the day, it may well be that during the night they will not be used because the drivers are mostly taking long pause over the night. So if you have modular designs that allow you to use that same full power that can deliver megawatt range of power class during the day, that during the night it delivers this in bits of few kilowatts that is able to recharge the trucks during the long time of pause that the trucks have during the night. So, and doing so, you also maximize the investment, you minimize the capex doing so, and you also minimize the need to put some infrastructure on one side. So you get to the best utilization rates of the infrastructure. That's also a key factor.
I would like to add plug and charge to the system, because I think for a truck driver it's key that he doesn't have to hassle with 3 apps or RFID cards when he's plugging in, especially because the time that he is using for plugging in is work time. So his break starts, but then officially he would not be allowed anymore to plug in the cable because it's work time. So any minute he is using in vain for authorizing the charging process is a deal breaker. So we need to make it very easy for them to just plug in and go back into the cabin or to stay outside. Yeah.
And to add there also the roaming, so the experience when you go to different countries with the truck. So for plug and charge with the roaming platform is just easier. It works then in all the countries, while as if you have then different apps, different networks necessary, then the driver has to additional hassle with different authentication and payment systems.
And you have language barriers very often.
Right.
And this is why you don't want to have there any manual that they need to read or so. Just plug in and leave, otherwise.
So even credit card payment systems would be a downside for a truck driver. Is that right?
Although they'll be required with the new AFIR legislation,
Yeah.
which is one of the key pieces that is kind of helping to shape the infrastructure ecosystem within the European context.
What about these light commercial vehicles? Because the delivery vehicles, I mean, the kind that you see a lot in Berlin streets, blocking up the roads, bringing people their Amazon deliveries or their groceries or whatever. These vehicles obviously are much lighter than the trucks that we've been talking about. What are the specific requirements for these types of vehicles, and also how do their charging needs, or if you could, describe for us sort of the optimal circumstances, to be able to charge these types of vehicles and to meet the needs of those types of drivers, what would that be like?
Mm-hmm. So for example, the light and medium duty trucks, so let's say 7.5 tons, depending on the use case, if you have a hub to city or deliveries within the cities, daily driving ranges of maximum 200 to 300 kilometers are fully sufficient. You have, of course, a bigger share of overnight charging or charging within the logistics hubs or logistics companies. But also the recharging, if you consider, for example, a delivery to supermarkets, where you have use some time to recharge if you have a longer stay. But the vast majority will charge overnight with charging powers that we also know from CCS today. Since they are also sold in larger scales, and also the cost sensitivity is definitely there, so we also then look into cost downs like alternative battery systems that are not that expensive than if you have to have a really good energy density. That's from my perspective.
Yeah, I mean, this is a bit of a tangential answer to your question. I apologize in advance. But one of the areas that we think is really interesting is logistics areas, because we originally saw that as these areas outside of cities where, you'll just do at-home charging. It's not really a space to think through public charging. But we're seeing all these different use cases emerge where if you need fast charging, there are people that don't want to invest in that infrastructure on their own site, so they're looking to other people to provide that. Or you have so many trucks coming in to use the overnight infrastructure that you can't actually charge all the delivery trucks that come in. And so I feel like that's actually an area to watch as a huge opportunity for public charging in particular, in addition to kind of these private flows that we're seeing.
Maybe we can now hear the perspective from CPO, Anton. So what opportunities do commercial vehicles offer from an energy perspective?
Yeah. I think depot charging is really a keyword here, because when you think about the overnight charging, it's enough time. It's not so big batteries. And the question is, how can you really, from an energy provider's perspective, work with the batteries, with smart charging? How can you get energy very cheap? And of course, for the logistic company, that's also an advantage. I think that's really for the depot charging. And we heard before about the vehicle grid approach. I think that's basically a lot of batteries sitting around. Of course, it has to be robust, reliable, full in the morning, but you can work with them in between. And then that's something we are working on at the moment.
And this brings, of course, a requirement on the depot, because these depots were not constructed and built and designed to place the charging infrastructure. So it has to be, you have to sneak the bits and parts of power electronics and chargers where you can, allowing for the vehicles to move around. So there's a lot of work to be done by charger manufacturers there to allow that infrastructure, these charging points to come close to the vehicles enough for them to be recharged. And one other part also in the discussion here is these were not designed, these locations, to charge vehicles, so the grid access point may be also limited to provide the power needed at a point of time for all these vehicles. So you have to rethink the whole energy and power management on the site.
Yep.
You may very well need, and this was a topic we were discussing in preparation, some power storage aside, some batteries aside to help in the power assist if the grid is limited to bring the power into all the vehicles at once that would need it. That is true for depots, that's true also for on-the-road charging also. So there's lots of thinking also to be brought into redesigning the whole energy system to supply the needed power at the point of time.
Redesigning the whole energy system is a big ask. I think so. What would be then maybe the first step, or what would be the priority? You know, obviously you can't change everything overnight, but if you wanted to really simplify and encourage the electrification of commercial fleets, what would be the top 3 things that you would like to see happen first? Then?
I don't know if I can list the top 3, but I would say that this is something that we're thinking a lot about, because it's essential that we get the power to be able to sell our trucks, our vehicles. But the way that we think about it is communicating with the utilities so that they know where to expect power needs. We know where the trucks flow today. Our competitors know where their trucks flow today. And if we can convey that information, if we can work with these players so that they can already work now to build out that power in anticipation of the needs, then it's a much better optimized system than if they just have to guess at where maybe the trucks might show up, for example.
And Anton, maybe the charge point operator perspective, we can just go down the...
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge here is, we know how long building at the moment takes, because it's a fight for transformators, construction, grid connection itself, and even permits. And I think that's something we have to speed up when we have 2030 in mind, and there is so we have to think also about how can we keep track and improve the whole processes in communication with the utilities and everything. Yeah.
Are we talking permits like government permits, like that kind
Also
of things?
like that,
Because we love regulations in Europe, and we need to fill out 19,000 forms in triplicate and have them stamped, and before anybody can build anything, right?
Yep.
No.
So for the top 3, I would say all related to the fact that it will take time, and we have to do it. So just do it. Realize, for those who are not conscious, but I'm sure here, vast majority of people here are certainly convinced that it's coming. So don't waste any time in planning the steps. It's possible to go small steps as well. You will not revamp the whole system overnight. So small steps are possible, and there are technology bricks which are already there. So I'm speaking here for the charging infrastructure. This technology bricks is already there to facilitate things. So you can have modular systems, you can have storage systems that can help also with grid transition issues. And moving along the steps, plan also for the long term, because there is so much happening in the way the whole energy scene and the whole energy ecosystem is moving. So there are lots of new business models which are coming and to jump into over the mid to long term. So having this short-term approach, but also keeping the long-term perspective is something that is certainly key.
Regarding the small steps you have mentioned, so the power management, load management on site could be something that we could start right away. We have the interfaces with ISO 15118, also -20 with the dynamic mode, with bidirectional charging. So there's also, we heard before from Ion on the dynamic pricing, so there's a lot of room to play with when it comes to incentives for load management. But on the other side, towards grid operators, so from our perspective, it's also very crucial that we have also the acceleration of planning of grid expansion, because this will be also a key factor that we keep also the electricity prices low, because renewable energies are available, right? But it's really a shame if we have to cut the power from wind turbines, because we cannot transmit the power where we need it, and have to activate gas plants, so that's also crucial.
And I think it's very important to think everything as a system, because you have OEMs providing vehicles, vehicle availability will be there, you have charge point operators installing chargers and want to sell energy, you have drivers, logistic companies, you have utilities, you have cities, and what you should do is, in my opinion, if you start such kind of project, get everyone on a table and say, this is the goal, these are the 20, 40 charging bays we want to have there. What does everybody here need to do in order that we will get there in 4 years? Because if you take that step by step with each party, the first party will forget what you have discussed with them, and then you start from the beginning. So this is why we created such a kind of a Waben system, where you have all the companies in there, and get them in one project at one table, otherwise it will be crucial to get those systems there. Yeah.
Listen, it's a good reminder that I think the biggest problems in general can't be solved by any one person, that it really takes a team effort and also just a lot of different perspectives and players sort of working together to be able to get to where we all want to go. Why don't we pause here and open up the floor to questions from our audience? Yeah, there's a lot to unpack, and I'm curious also to hear from some of the different players that keep getting mentioned. So it's about utilities, it's about charge point operators, it's about OEMs, it's about people planning infrastructure, it's about city planners, it's about so many factors. So really curious to hear from our audience. Again, we're going to do 2 ways, the old-fashioned way, just raise your hand and somebody will walk over with a microphone, like this guy, and then we'll take also questions from our app, from people who are either following along the live stream from their home office or from their company office. And yeah, we'll start with this gentleman right up front.
Hello. First of all, great engaging panel, so I'm very happy till now. We talked about a lot of themes, our commercial vehicles, leapfrogging, EV charging, and we didn't mention dynamic load management. What is your approach? Like every one of you, it's very interested in it. What's your strategy in your company? Do you want to develop that internally or with partners? And yeah, by the way, I'm Tarek from Gridix.
Yeah, who would like to begin?
I can answer that one. So we at Huawei, we deliver like as a components the working horse of the charging station. So that's the power electronics, and we make it as modular as possible to be integrated into a system where dynamic power management will be possible, and this for few main purposes. One of them, as I mentioned, is when there is a great congestion on the access point. Other one can be also to maximize the utilization of the charging assets, so the power electronics, to be charging as many as vehicles at once by allocating the power needs to the real needs of the vehicles. And of course, this is done typically by power and energy management systems like those by Gridix, which can typically play with this on these pieces of equipment.
From an OEM perspective, I could add that we already mentioned the interfaces that are very crucial for dynamic load management, that we have the information of dynamic prices. We have dynamic mode to really influence the charging curve from the back-end side. So as from an OEM point of view, this is really crucial that we have the instantaneous load management possible and do not have to, for example, reschedule the entire charging curve on one vehicle and then it won't fit to the needs from the other vehicles. And as part of the Traton group with the Traton charging services, for example, we look also into charging services, including energy management systems. And then it's the task to combine everything into a smart ecosystem. But this is a really high priority also from our perspective.
For us, maybe to add, I think it's key because we have to bring in local PV, local batteries, grid connection. And I think as we have it already today, when we do load balancing, let the driver know what's happening. Because he's not maybe expecting he gets whatever 150 kilowatt and he was throttled to 50 and he doesn't be aware of it. So, but that's not something we develop our own. So.
I would say it's something that we've heard from a lot of customers that they're very interested in. And if we're talking about the larger total cost of ownership, it's a great way to bring down the overall cost. And so I guess my simple answer is yes, but also I think sometimes we forget that simplicity, there's also value in simplicity for charging solutions, affordable, simple charging solutions, and not all of our customers need kind of the fancy, most complex solutions. So I'd say yes with an asterisk is for dynamic.
Great. Let's maybe take one from the app, and then we'll get the gentleman on this side of the room. But let's. Building public charging stations for trucks or buses is expensive. We know this. How do you see the problem of no funding programs in Germany, and how do you see the pricing the CPO has to charge then?
Maybe easy to answer. I think there need to be funding programs, and I think that also leapfrogged the normal EV sector quite a lot. And that has also an impact on the whole pricing topic. Because if there is no funding, yes, maybe there is a business case, but of course the pricing then will be different than if there is funding. So I think it's crucial.
Yeah, thank you very much. Then we had a question here, and then number 2. Okay, so first this gentleman. No, change your mind. Okay, so then let's take...
No, it's here.
He's here, I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, my name is Paweł, I'm from Sol Studio, and I've got one question. So what do you think will happen, or what is currently happen? Will the existing CPOs adjust to support the heavy-duty trucks, or will there be a new set of players in this industry?
Yes. I guess to both. I think we're seeing a lot of the existing players that have a lot of experience in this space, also entering into the heavy-duty vehicle space. But there's also room for innovation and challenging those traditional business models. And so I'd say we're excited to see both emerging from our perspective.
I think there are new players coming in as well. So I've heard of companies building truck charging hubs now, and nobody would ever have mentioned them in the combination with charging before, but now they do. So I think we will see a new set of players, and there are also CPOs that decided strategically to not go into truck charging so far. So there are CPOs like you guys and some others that will do truck charging, others will step out, but I think we will see a new set of players coming in.
Mm-hmm. Let's take another question via the app, and then we'll go to the person over here. So let's have a look. So how many times more is a heavy-duty vehicle charging on a yearly basis compared to a passenger car? And what is the kilowatt amount per hour?
I think it depends on the usage, on the type of vehicle, and what kind of passenger car is meant in the question.
Yeah.
Because there are cars standing around 350 days, and there are cars being used 70,000 kilometers per year. So I think it's quite hard to make a specific comparison here. But every vehicle that is standing around does not make money, so it needs to be on the road. So this is why trucks are being used as often as they can, and this is why they need to be charged like twice a day. And the kilowatt hours, maybe you can say something about your nominal capacity, but I think we are talking about 300-400 kilowatt hours.
Yeah, we have up to 300 to 400 kilowatt hours now in our e-truck that you can visit outside. So for a truck, you can say you have 260 to 300 days a year operation, and depending on the use case, either 1 or 2 recharging cycles, and that gives you over the 10 years of a long-haul truck a significant amount of energy, and also the robustness of the hardware must be, of course, then also much higher than for passenger vehicles.
And maybe to add on that, I think what you mentioned, the predictability, that's something which is quite interesting instead of the normal user behavior with the car.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, we had another question over here.
Hello. Hello, yeah. My name is Vineet, and as a green technology enthusiast, I would just like to know what are the tangible advancements and developments taking place within the EV industry to make long-haul trucking more appealing? For example, we know that diesel trucks, for example, just need to spend 15 minutes to refuel, and then they can run for 1,200 miles without stopping. But their electric counterparts, they need they only have a range of around 300 miles, and they require around 10 hours of charging. So how do we bridge this enormous gap?
So with MCS, we will be much faster, gladly, for recharging. So the key is that you not necessarily need to be as fast as for refueling for charging, because, for example, when you have the legal driver's break, you have to spend 45 minutes after 4.5 hours driving. So you have the 45 minutes time to recharge the battery, and we also is not a problem with the power range around 750 kilowatts to 1 megawatt to recharge the battery fully within this 45 minutes. So the technology is there. The rollout of the infrastructure is then the issue. If you have other use cases like the coach, where you have really only around 15 to 20 minutes time in large cities or in the final destinations, even there with megawatt charging we get along, so that the key is that the customer doesn't lose any time in his use cases for charging. We should either have a break, and he should relax, or she should relax during the break and don't have to worry about charging, but we do not have to be as fast as for refueling in most of the use cases. Yeah.
And to add on that, I think there's a chance now to rethink those charging hubs, like the possibility of how do drivers spend their time today. And I think if we build those places new, and we have to, because otherwise you don't get the grid connection there, you don't have the parking slots. So why don't make them attractive? This was your point with appealing for the truck drivers. So they have like a quality of stay where they can spend their time pleasantly, have clean showers, clean toilets. This is part of the project. And then you make it appealing for the drivers, because every logistic company has issues getting drivers. And if you make electric truck driving more attractive than diesel truck driving, then you get those drivers.
Yeah, that's why amenities are a key piece on our wish list of station design. And we've actually seen a lot of really cool station designs to that effect. I think they're going to be a lot nicer places to hang out in than today's diesel refueling locations. And even with today's high-power charging, you can already get quite, a good charge to actually complete many missions. And we're seeing exactly these business models emerge, thanks to great CPOs.
Okay, we have the hands are shooting up. Okay, let's go 1, and then 2, and then 3. We have 2 more minutes, guys, so let's see how far we get.
Hi, my name is Ketan Deshmukh. I work for Hubcheck. The panel already mentioned the importance of reservation in case of commercial vehicle charging. What are some of the key hurdles do you anticipate from CPO perspective for making the reservation possible? Because that's what we don't see in the passenger industry today.
Exactly, and why don't we see it? Because the systems never have been fully ready. I think it's a backend system, it's the app or the user journey. It's also, like say, the roaming platforms. And it has to be really a smooth way through all the systems to have all the information ready and make it work. And I think it's doable, but we have just to start doing it now seriously.
The next question back there.
Yeah, Claudio from Ridergy here. I'm curious on your views on the big hurdles of DSOs approving the grids. I heard as much as 10 years for these public charging hubs. So, do you anticipate a roadmap and these roadblocks to be tackled? How is your view on making these 4.5-hour charging stations we need to have across Europe possible?
I mean, my answer to that, maybe we can add, I think that's a problem we see the last years with the big rollout of the normal charging infrastructure already. And it's not just charging infrastructure. Solar is happening again, wind power is happening again. Basically, let's say the whole grid industry and the DSO have slept too long, basically. And it starts with digitalization, permits. You have to send paper permits 8 times to get an allowance. For what reason? We can send an email. Once time we have been offered, we can send a fax. Yeah? So that's not how it will work. And I think it's more the pressure, but that's also coming back to politics and commitment. And then it has just to be done. But it's, let's say, a very crusty industry.
All right, let's take one final question. I think it was, I'm sorry, there was, or the person in the back who was raising his hand and waiting very patiently. Okay.
Hello, Joachim Köpp from MetaCharge. So we are developing a planning and scheduling service for charging events, including a simplified UI for the driver. And obviously this is an end-to-end problem. So you have the driver with the schedule, maybe break times, shift times, etc. You have the vehicle capabilities, and you also have the grid capabilities and the charging stations. So where do you think this planning logic should actually sit? Should it sit with an EMP, the CPO, a grid company, the truck OEM, or the logistics company, or some other entity?
I would say I wish there were one system engineer for the whole system, because it would make everything so much easier if we could just take all these pieces and optimize them. It'd be more affordable, it'd be better design. But it just is a part of the puzzle that there are going to be different players and different people that want to own different parts at different times. And so I think it's all about trying to build the best building blocks of the system that you can control. And I think each of the players that you listed actually do have a role in building the best possible building blocks of that system.
Yeah, why don't we leave it there? As with so many of these topics, there's still so much more to discuss, but the conference is not over yet, so you can find each other during the breaks, during the lunch, and let the conversation continue. But for now, many thanks to Annie, Anton, Frederick, Vincenz, and Marco. Really interesting to hear all of your perspectives. Thank you so much.